So tonight we're going to be talking about Chanoyu, which is the Japanese tea ceremony, and the garden. This particular garden too. So there's a lot going on in the garden outside, but not every single thing about it has to do with Chanoyu. So I'm going to try to point out the things that are really important about the tea ceremony and how it becomes necessary for the full gathering. Now, just curious, how many people here have even heard of the Japanese tea ceremony before? Oh, good, that makes it easier. Yes, okay. I thought, how am I gonna explain all this in an hour? Well, even though we've often seen, I don't need that. Even though we've seen like tea ceremony demonstrated many times before, and it seems like this very choreographed thing, has all these steps to it, it takes like 20, 30 minutes. But really what that is just one part of a larger tea gathering. And that larger tea gathering, the standard tea gathering, which we call a Chaji, lasts like 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And so there's a lot going on. And part of that does have to do with the garden itself. But before we jump into all of that, you might be thinking, who are you? Why are you talking? So my name is Omar Francis, and I studied or first encountered Japanese tea ceremony when I was going to school at the University of Illinois in Champaign. I was there for my undergrad for photography, and I took a class in tea ceremony. It was a university class, and then it got me curious, and I stayed on taking other classes, being part of the club, and I studied the rest of my time at college there. And then once I moved to Chicago, I found my teacher, Joyce Cabose, that I have now, and I just kept studying from then. Kept studying. I even had the great opportunity to go to the headquarters of our school. There's many different traditions of tea ceremony. I'm not gonna list them all, but my school is called Urasenke. And so I had the chance to study for a year in Kyoto at Urasenke. And then after that, I just kept studying and eventually I've been teaching. I think it's been like 30 years altogether now that I've been studying Japanese tea ceremony. But before all that, there we go. I was here in high school. I was born and raised here in Rockford. And so I was a part of the art club at Auburn High School. Go Knights? Knights? All right, go Knights. So I think this was before the garden was even open to the public. And they allowed my class to come and sketch around the garden. Now, I don't think that path was raked at the time, so please forgive me for sitting on that stone and putting my feet in the rock garden. I don't think it was quite that put together yet. But Tim, you told me you were here at that time.
What year was that?
I think this is probably 89.
Yeah.
89 or 90, because I graduated in 90.
That was my first year here.
So you might have seen me put my feet in your garden.
We still talk about that.
Yeah. They swore to me it was okay. They told me it was okay. So I don't know. So I'm definitely born and raised Rockford guy. It's so nice to be back here, talking about tea and back in the place that kind of sparked it all for me. So this is pretty cool for me. So thank you for coming and thank you for letting me do this. But in case I'm gonna turn this around a little bit. I can stand, but I'm a little lazy sometimes, so I'm gonna stay down. A lot of times when we think of the Japanese tea ceremony, we see something like this, right? It's kind of stiff. But, you have the person who, I've got a pointer. The person here is the host, and they have all these implements here to make tea for the guests. It's not usually this somber. There's a lot going on, and people actually smile. But just in case you didn't know what we're talking about, this is what a tea gathering often looks like. Some of these implements we'll talk a little bit more later. And in case you didn't know, the tea that we're talking about is matcha. It's a green powdered tea that you drink in a bowl instead of a cup. Truly speaking, all tea comes from the same bush, same plant. There are little sub-varieties, of course, but you get your different teas from how you produce it. If you shade it in part of the year, if you pluck the leaves right away, if you let the leaves wither in the sun, you'll get your black teas, your brown teas, your green teas. So for green tea, or any variety of like almost green tea, you add heat to the leaf and that stops it from fermenting, stops it from turning brown. So the matcha is steamed like right away, and then later pulverize into a powder, and then you add hot water, you drink that up, and you're drinking the entire leaf itself. So it's a bit stronger than other varieties of tea, and if there's anything good in it, you're getting more of it. But that's what the whole tea gathering really is about, is sitting down, having a bowl of tea together. Now, if it was that simple, then I probably would have been studying for so long. Here in the garden then, we have a tea house. It's a little hard to see, but that's kind of the point, because the tea house is supposed to be a space away from everything else. It's a moment of peace away from all the going-ons in life. It has a history of over 500 years in Japan, and so definitely if you want to think about it in a romantic way, samurai were doing this, maybe ninja were under the house getting ready to stab them. You know, it has a whole long history for people who lived a very exciting and difficult life. And so the tea gathering was a moment away from everything else, away from politics, away from religion, away from war, just a time you and your friends together. But what do we do at a tea gathering? So I wanted to put another slide in here before, so I'm just gonna have to talk you through it. So when the guests come to a tea gathering, they're not greeted by the host, they're not greeted by an assistant usually, they just show up. And there's different subtle signs to let you know if it's time to go in. If a door is ajar a little bit, if there's water sprinkled out on the ground, that means we're ready for you, come on in. And as I was joking with Tim, you don't wanna be on time, you wanna be early. So if you don't see the water sprinkled out, if you don't see any doors open, that means wait. So with my teacher in Chicago, we would like drive around the block a couple more times, go around the corner, wait, but you don't wanna be early. You don't wanna be late, but you don't wanna be early. Well, if you have once everything's settled in, you go in and you don't meet the host right away. You go into a waiting room. And in that waiting room, you leave everything behind that you don't need. You leave your jacket behind, you leave your extra shoes behind, you leave your purse and phone behind. And even if you came in with a beautiful kimono with the split toe socks, you don't wear those into the tea room. You need to change into a fresh pair, because those were dirty from outside, so you need something new for inside. Once all that's done and you're settled, maybe you get a sample of the water that'll be used for the tea today. Because who knows, that came from a famous well or a beautiful spring or somewhere up the mountain, so you just drink a little bit of the water. And after that then, the guests make their way outside. So that's kind of where we are now. So you'll see it in the garden outside. In many places, you have these stone paths that will take you to the tea house itself. I'm gonna come back to this image in a minute. But this path, I just wanted to point out. So you have these individual stones, and they're made to make you slow down. You have to be careful, you have to watch your step, you have to really see where you're going and slow down and enjoy the environment. Right here, it's a little bare right now. This is not a tea house here in the garden, this is a place in Japan. But usually the moss will grow right up to the stones, or you have extra little pebbles that go right up to the stones, and you still just kind of make your way through the garden slowly. Not directly to the tea house though. But this is here in the gardens in Anderson Garden, and luckily, he flattened things down a little bit for us, because as I found through time, they can be a little hard to walk through if you have even just a little bit of problem walking. Walking on those stepping stones are treacherous. And then you have this beautiful moss around, and you don't want to really mess that up with your cane. So nicely at Anderson Gardens, they flatten everything out for us. But what I wanted to point out is this stone here. It's a little different than the other ones. See, it's round, it's got these hatch marks in it, a little hole in the middle, and I think there's a second one here in the garden too. That's right here. So it has a special meaning for tea gatherings or tea ceremony. What this is this is the actual grinding stone that would be used to grind the tea into a powder. Now, you're not gonna use it that day. I'm not saying you take it out of the ground and grind it, but this is an old one, maybe a weathered one that you put into the garden as part of the decoration. I have a better picture here. So the grinding stone would have two parts. The part here on the right, it's connected to a basin, and then this part here will flip over and go right on top of it. And so the leaves are fed down the middle, and it's slowly ground into a powder, which this lady is happily doing. It's fun, see, because she enjoys it so much. She can't quite sit on her knees, but that's okay, it's fine. Nowadays, when we buy green powdered tea, when we buy matcha, you can buy it in a powdered form already. But originally, you would buy just the leaves. Now, I said that most of all teas comes from the same plant, but not all tea can be matcha. So there's a special way to grow it, a special way to harvest it. Even before harvest time, they cover up the whole tea field so it's starved of sunlight. And then that makes the plant struggle and get really green, and it produces really more chlorophyll, and so it changes the taste of the tea. And then it's harvested, steamed, put away for half a year, deveined, and then you get this. And so once you have your tea, then you would grind it yourself. Some people can still do that, but most of us just buy it pre-ground. She has a few implements on the side here to like scoop up the dust and put it into a tea container. But even now, if you do buy it commercially, in the factories, they're still doing the same thing. It's still the same stone or two stones, and the tea's being fed through the top. You can't really do it any other way. If you do it with any other kind of grinding stone, it won't taste the same. If you go too fast, it'll change the flavor. So I think it takes an hour to fill up a 20-ounce can, 20 gram can, sorry, big difference. It takes about an hour to fill up a can of tea. So at these tea factories where we would get our tea from, there's a room of like 100 of these just running the whole time. But if you ever see this in a garden, you'll see it here in other gardens. That's what it is. It's the grinding stone for grinding matcha. And people just like to put it in for cute decoration. But back to the path. So we have this stone path, and okay, this is a lot. It would be hard to go through there. But the difficult thing is that where do you go? Because at this point, the guests are still by themselves. They're walking through the garden by themselves, and they have no direction. So you could do it this way, which here in Japanese it says, "Koko kara wa iremasen," like you don't enter through here. You could do it like that, but usually we do something far more subtle. We have a stone like this. You have a stone, you wrap it up with this black twine, and it goes on each path that you're not supposed to take. So again, you make your way through the garden, there's no one around, you're enjoying the scenery, and you see a stone, and you're like, oh, not that way, and you go someplace else. And you go a little further and like, oh, not that way. And so these stones are called, I had to write it down because I was gonna forget, Sekimori Ishi. So it's the like protecting the path stone. So again, you might see these in the gardens. Usually though, today and in Japan, you'll get these big signs like, don't go in here. The reason they actually put that one in this one is this is a public tea house that people go in and have just a quick bowl of tea. And the typical way to enter a tea room would be to go through this garden. And so for people who would know, they want to try to go that way. So they try to politely put this sign here like, don't do it, just go in here. Okay. So as you're going through the garden and you've made your way through, you're going to the preparation room, you've left everything behind, you're going to the garden, and you actually end up here. You're not at the tea room yet. This is called a koshikake machiai. It's like a bench waiting place. I hesitate because koshikake means bench, but it kind of means like a place to hang your butt. So it's a butt hanging place. At least that's the way I remember it. Maybe in Japanese it sounds even better, but that's what I remember. So the guests would go to this bench here in the garden. And as you see here, there's not really much as far as flowers. There's no bright colors, there's no strong smells, there's definitely no thorns or anything like that, because the tea garden is supposed to be a relaxing place. And you don't need the flowers outside to compete with any flower arrangement you would have inside. So deliberately, the tea garden is just green. Green and stone and moss, and that's all it should be. It's supposed to be, again, this transition, taking you from the outside world to the inside world. And the guests will come here and just have a seat. So here's one example from a place in Japan. Here's another one that's probably a more private house. But I wanted to point out that as the guests sit down, you have these stones out front. Of course, you see the stone that they probably took to come in. And you have these stones right here where they would sit. There is a difference here. There's a large stone, and that's where the first guest will sit. There is a feeling of equality in the tea room, but someone has to be first, and kind of someone has to be responsible. I was gonna say in charge, but responsible. Someone has to be responsible for all the other guests, and that's usually the first guest, which is the main guest, and there's just a little bit of deference shown to that person. Could be male or female. Sometimes people think only women do this, or only men could be the first guest. That really doesn't matter. It tends to be the oldest or the person most knowledgeable in tea. So they would sit here and all the other guests next to them. I think it shows up, yeah, a little bit in this picture. So that's where that stone is. That's where the first guest would sit. And then the other guests will be next to it. And there's a good chance, I couldn't tell from the enlargement, that could be one of those grinding stones right there. Well, sorry this is kind of a blurry picture, but I'll explain what this is. So when you come to the bench and you want to have a seat, but you don't want your guests to mess up their nice clothes, so instead of sitting directly on the bench, there's a stack of cushions. They're stacked and arranged for the guests, and then by themselves they would move them down and arrange them for each other. In fact, we always make sure that the top one is turned upside down so then it doesn't get dirty. There's rules. There's so many rules and conventions and ideas. But on top of that, we have a tobacco bowl. And if it sounds like I said tobacco, that's really it. It's a smoking tray. Because really, these tea gatherings are a moment to appreciate things. And there was a time in Japan that tea was a very rare commodity. Tea as the drink, or even some of these traditions came from China. So tea was an imported thing. And so if you, even to be able to afford to drink tea showed that you were connected, that you were wealthy, that you were sophisticated. And so you're enjoying your beautiful tea. Maybe you're gonna have a smoke. Maybe you're gonna have a drink. Maybe you're gonna look at these beautiful vases. So it's not really just about tea. It's like a fancy party with all your best things. Tea's like the big highlight, but it's kind of like the big excuse to come together. So tobacco was definitely enjoyed, and by some still enjoyed, in the tea room. Now, doesn't look like there's much tobacco here, because, here, I'll show you this. I'll get back to that. So here's another tobacco tray. A little full set of the implements you would use. Here on the left side, you have a small ceramic container, and there's like a burning piece of incense plopped inside. I'm sorry, a burning piece of charcoal inside. For the charcoal for the tea gathering, instead of like the briquettes that we barbecue with, it's more like there's a process of taking the entire branch and turning it into a piece of charcoal. And so you still have the bark on it, you can still see the veins on it. And so you take a small piece of that, get it started, get it nice and warm, and you plop it in there. Then you make a beautiful arrangement of the ash around it. And then in that envelope behind it, that's where the tobacco will be. It's really fine, kind of like horsehair fine. And so the guests would take the pipe, put a little tobacco inside, kind of light it on the burning piece of incense or charcoal, have a couple of puffs, enjoy themselves, but then what do you do with the embers? So you have this piece of green bamboo that has a little water inside, because they make natural cups. And then you can just tap off the ashes in there. So even if you don't provide tobacco for your guests, this is a symbol of please relax. So when they see the tobacco tray, they're like, oh, please relax. Now, personally, I have to say, when I was in Japan, there was a time where we were having tea gatherings at the school, and we have all the foreign students, you know, people from the United States, and Mexico, and Russia, and all sorts of places. We were one group, and then they had all the Japanese students, or like 100 of them, of all different ages, different grades. And they were putting on a tea gathering, and they put out a tobacco tray in the tea room, or in the waiting room. And I said to my teacher, like, are are we supposed to smoke? And he's like, well, they put it out. So like, okay, so we did. Like all of like 20 of us are in there smoking the tobacco. I don't think anyone expected us to. I don't think anybody wanted us to. I know that we slowed the whole process down because everything is timed. And not being a smoker, by the time we got into the tea room, I was a little like affected. So I don't know, but my teacher said like, if you put something out, you should expect someone to use it. If you say, please make yourself at home, you shouldn't get upset if someone does it. If someone says, please relax, then don't be mad if they actually relax. And so we were kind of like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, let's do it. So I'm sure they're talking about it to this day, but we slowed everything down and kind of got a little tipsy on tobacco. But that's what it's supposed to be for. And this is the waiting bench here at Anderson Gardens. So this is a shot straight in, and this is a shot to the side. And as you can see right here, that's the large stone where the first guest would sit. And so out here, they will be at the bench. They'll have those little cushions. They'll have a tobacco tray out there to let them know that please relax. Maybe they're smoking, but they're sitting here, and the host still has not met the guests yet. So the guests have maybe been here 15, 20 minutes, maybe more, and they're by themselves, just enjoying the garden. Now, if that sounds stressful to you, then that's why we have to train. You know, you're at the height of hospitality, the host will have that attitude of please make yourself comfortable. However, you should have the good sense not to make yourself too comfortable. Unlike myself when I was smoking in the tea room. So it's kind of a play that some people might get upset, like, why don't they just say what they mean? But it's a dance of a sort that I really want you to make yourself completely comfortable. But you are also very concerned about me, so you don't want to put me out too much. So I say, please relax, and you say, oh, I'm fine. Do you want another drink of water? No, I've had enough. Are you sure? Well, okay, well, you know, so that, it might seem like a bit much, but this way, everybody feels taken care of. And this way, everybody feels heard, and this way, everyone has been seen. So you just kind of gotta do it. Well, eventually though, the guests would sit, and as they're waiting for the host, and this is not in all tea gardens, but they definitely have it here at Anderson Gardens. There's this like plaque here, this piece of wood. And so what the first guest can do is hit that with a mallet that's provided somewhere nearby to let them know that they're there. Usually you'll hit it as many times as many guests you have. So 3 guests, 3 strikes, 2 guests, 2 strikes. And then the host will know, okay, I can come out now. So again, still you haven't seen the host yet. What would happen then, there's this little gate right there. Not enough to keep even a squirrel out. You know, but it's a gate because it's important because the tea garden, which we call a roji, has a front part and a back part. The front garden and the back garden, you could say. And there's a transition going past this point. So you're going deeper and deeper into the tea space. This is the guest house here on the property. So you'll also see another one here. So these things aren't just typical parts of gardens. These are definitely parts of tea gardens. And so it kind of lets you know that there's probably an entrance to a tea house nearby. Because these gates are important because the guests don't go past here until they meet the host. So, and these gates too are very portable. Sometimes they're made new each time. And so you can just kind of take them off those posts. So sometimes you won't see the gate, you'll just see the 2 posts when they're not in use. Here we go again, and they removed it. And I wanted to include this one too, because you can see the path a little better. Here it's grown up really nicely. You got the moss coming right in, and the stones leading you again to the tea house. And I think I might mention it later, but I'll mention it now. The path does split in 2 different ways, and again, there'll be a stone there or something to let the guests know, don't go this way, go this way. At Anderson Gardens, they have a nice sign here that says, don't go in here. So that's pretty clear too. There's a good reason I put that there, but I'll come back to it. So what would happen then is the host will come out of the tea space most likely, and they'll do a little business. The guests will hear them. There's something they're preparing. Then they'll come out to the gate. They open the gate. The guests will stand up, and then everybody will bow together. They're not speaking yet. They just bow together. That's all that's needed. The host goes back into the tea house. Again, does a little business on the way in, which I'll explain, and the guests will have a seat. After a proper amount of time, the guests then one by one make their way into the tea room. And as I said, there's the first guest who has to know what to do, but really the last guest also has to know what to do, because there's doors to open and doors to close and things to gather and things to move over here. And so your most knowledgeable person will probably be first. Your second knowledgeable is last, and then everybody in the middle just goes along for the ride. You know, just do what I do, don't mess up. It's kind of the feeling. I mean, yes, a tea gathering is a wonderful, beautiful time, but the same kind of stresses you would feel of like going to a really beautiful, fancy restaurant, and that kind of like, did I wear the right clothes? Am I touching the right fork? How am I supposed to eat this? No one's telling me what to do. So imagine if you went to a restaurant and no one ever told you how to use a knife and fork, or where the bathroom is, or this is for cleaning your fingers and not for eating. You know, like all these things, again, you're kind of put into this situation. And that's why I put this picture in, because there's something very similar to when you go to be entertained by geisha. Now, by coincidence, the name for a place where a geisha entertain is often called a tea house in English. In Japanese, it's a chaya, right? Chaya, which does kind of mean tea house, but our tea houses are called a chashitsu. It's a different word, but they both have the word tea in it. Well, when you go to their place, and let's say you and your friends get together, you're gonna go to Kyoto, it's like, that's it, we're gonna see some geisha. Well, first of all, you're wrong, because they're not called geisha in Kyoto, they're called geiko. But anyway, you go to see geisha in Kyoto, you knock on the door, like, let me in. They will refuse you. They will turn you away. They will not let you in. It's not because they're trying to be super exclusive. It's that there's a way that you behave in this place, and they're not there to teach you. Any host, when you're in a position of hosting, of taking care of someone, you're not there to teach them, because that's awkward. And you know, me telling you what to do, you're supposed to be here feeling comfortable. So, like I said before, the guests have to be knowledgeable. So when you first go into a place like this, you will always be refused. You have to come with someone who's a regular. You have to come with someone who knows the etiquette. You have to come with someone who knows what's going on here. It's music, it's entertainment, it's a little bit of a fantasy, it's a little bit of, you know, wonderful night. You know, you gotta know the right way to act, and you gotta know the right way to participate. So it's the same in the tea world too. All this stuff that happened up to this point, the guests are completely alone. So without prior knowledge, you wouldn't know what to do. And then the feeling of like, this is wonderful and this is special just goes out the window, because everyone's just lost and uncomfortable. So you gotta have some training first. Aha, training. So I'm so happy because I just took this picture today. Looks better, right? So here at Anderson Gardens, as you leave the visitor center, you see like a water fountain like this. Clearly, this is for you to drink and have a sip and then leave the cup behind. So, you know, you take the clean cup here, you get a little water, and then you can dispose of it here. It makes a lot of sense. I'm glad they do it, because it's a big garden, you get tired and thirsty. But if you look throughout the garden, you'll see something else. You'll see these low stone basins, and they're about this high off the ground. They're pretty low. And there's a ladle, I brought a ladle. There's a ladle that you use to drink from, but these are not really water fountains to drink from. It has a completely different purpose. And it's definitely a purpose in the tea world. Oh, wrong thing. Here's one of, actually this is Shimotaki Sensei. She's one of the teachers from the Chicago group, but she's recently moved to Los Angeles, I believe. But this is in her backyard, and we were having a tea garden at her place. So this small stone basin is called a tsukubai. It's a place where you can purify your hands and mouth before going into the tea room. it really has its roots in Shintoism. Shintoism is, again, a whole nother lecture, but inaccurately, let me just say it's the Japanese native religion. It's a little more complicated than that, but it's focused not on, let's see, what is it? It's focused mostly on nature, spirits, energy, purity. There's a divinity to all things and probably all people, and that has to be respected. So when you go into a Shinto shrine area, before everyone goes forward and make their prayers and ask for their favor, you have to purify yourself first, your hands and your mouth. Many other religions do this too. You know, before praying, Muslims in particular, they have to clean their hands, mouths, feet, ears. You know, you don't just show up. You have to prepare yourself. And so that's kind of borrowed from Shintoism, and that's a part of the tea gathering. And don't worry if you don't know how to do it. Many people don't know how to do it. As I always say with all this with tea, it's not like if you're Japanese, you're just born and you know what to do, right? I hope, right? Everyone has to be trained. So even in Japan, you'll see like behind them, there's this sign here that shows like, don't do this, don't do that. So I'm gonna give you an idea of what you do. I'm just gonna grab mine. Now this is not the same kind of scoop. This is actually the scoop that we use while we're making tea, but it's close enough. Okay, so you have your scoop, and it usually lays sideways. I have to say, I did have a gathering once. It was Joyce Sensei, Shimotaki Sensei, some others. Actually, you were there too, I think. That's my wife, Melanie. And I set it out all the time like this, like I often see it at Shinto shrines. And every time I go outside, it was sideways. I'm like, wow. And I keep changing it. And every time I come out, it's changing. I'm like, what is going on? And eventually, like months later, I figured out I had it wrong. But no one told me, and my teachers just gently changed it. So usually it's on the stone sideways, like this. You would take a full scoop of water, you pour half of it into this hand to rinse your left hand. Switch and pour the other half into your right hand. Then you go ahead and take another full scoop, you pour this into your hand, and then you actually take it into your mouth. You can swish it or you can swallow it, but usually you kind of just spit it out. And then there's still water remaining here, and you turn the ladle up so it falls down here to purify the ladle that you're holding. And then you set it down. Then of course your hands are wet. So everybody will always have a doggy bag, a tissue. I walk my dog in this. Have a handkerchief ready to dry their hands. In general, if you're gonna go to Japan, have a handkerchief. There's not paper towels everywhere. So in the tea room, the same thing, that after you do this, you're gonna dry your own hands and then you can proceed. So each guest would do this one at a time before going into the tea room. There's another sukubai here at the garden. This is a lovely fall, well, I don't need to tell you, it's fall. It's another sukubai here in the garden, and it's actually quite special. This is a replica of one that's associated with this temple. This is a temple in Japan called Ryoanji. It's a very famous Zen temple, particularly for this garden here. It's your Karasan Sui, your dry rock garden, and all the rakings and stuff, you know, supposed to remind you of the ocean and the waves and the different rock formations are islands. Sometimes you can see like dragons coming out of the water. It depends on what you're imagining as you're sitting there meditating. Well, if you go around the side, because there's a building right in front of it where people sit and enjoy the garden. If you go around the other side, you'll see this. It's probably gonna look familiar already to everyone, but you'll see this. It looks like a coin, like an old Chinese or Japanese coin where it's circular and you have the square hole in the middle. And then it has these writings around the side. Now, if you understand Japanese or Chinese, they don't quite make sense, like something's missing. You know, it looks, they make words, but just part of a word. Because really that opening in the middle is part of each character. So it's like a visual pun, if you will. So this opening here, which is called the kuchi, the opening is this square shape right there. So with each character starting from the top and then going to the right and around, it becomes part of the character here. So translated, roughly, you know, you have I, only, enough, no, which actually doesn't help a whole lot, but I think, let's see, in full Japanese then, sometimes different particles are put in, like you just assume what they are. Ware tara taru wo shiru, which, again, that doesn't help a whole lot either. A lot of these are open to interpretation, but I think the best one I've heard is that I know when it's enough. You know, that I study, or I know when to be satisfied. So it's like a hope or a reminder that maybe while you're doing all this, particularly at the temple, all this meditation, all this studying, all this striving, all this like going for things, you're only doing it to know or to understand what is enough. And hopefully then, this is my interpretation now, when it's enough, you stop. You know, that you don't just study forever to get more awards. You don't just go for it all the time to be praised by everyone. You should know when enough is enough. So that's maybe another way to think of it. And if it looks familiar, it should, because it's also the symbol of the gardens. It's on all our stickers, it's on all the typeface and stuff like that. So it's made its way around. It's a very, very famous sukubai. And the purpose of this, again, is to purify your hands and mouth before going into the tea room. This is the one that we have outside the tea house here in the gardens. This one's a little larger, so it's more upright, so you can go up to it. And again, you still would use it to scoop out the water. I know this one has running water. Some sukubais have constant running water. Some sukubais are empty, and that the host would come and fill that out just before the guests arrive. You know, so that was some of the business, that they could hear the host coming, and you hear the water pouring into sukubai, and you hear them purify their hands and mouth, and then they would come greet the guests. So sometimes that's a nice symbol that the host is coming. So again, it's for purifying your hands and mouth. Not, however, to cool yourself off in the garden. I had a lot of fun on the internet. I was looking for a lot of images. So I can't say what date this was, but clearly when this lady got here, she was like, thank goodness. And so I guess that's fine, but the idea is it's really for purifying, you know, not to dry yourself off. I'm glad she wasn't drinking from it directly, but I took a lot from the internet for this one. So here's another shot of the garden itself, or sorry, the tea house itself, and you probably would never see it from this point of view because I think the photographer was basically standing in water for this. I mean, there's a pond right there, but it's a beautiful shot that you get to see. Let's see. So the bench was over on this side, and the guests will come around, and then the water station, the sukubai, is over here, and then they would make their way into the tea room. There's a few steps here to go up into the tea room, and that's the path the guests would take. I have another shot here. Now I know I said that tea gardens don't really have flowers, but I think that this tea house, the purpose also is to be enjoyed by everyone. You know, everyone who goes through the garden. And really, when you're at a tea garden or tea gathering, it's really for the people inside. So there's not much to see from the outside. So I think it should be changed a little bit so it's a beautiful feature of the garden. Still, it's just a little bit, and I think it's still pretty tasteful. So the guests, again, would make their way up into the tea house. This is a different one. This is down in Champaign, but I took pictures. Usually there's a large stone before the guests come in. Now in the tea, trying to find a good picture. So the entrance here, the doors just kind of slide across, slide open, and you just go right in. And that's a great feature, again, because then if they leave it open, everyone can see inside the tea house, and it's a beautiful thing that you can enjoy. What often happens though, if you can do it, the entrance to a tea house is this. It's called a nijiriguchi. It's a small crawling in entrance. So everybody who comes into the tea room would have to come in on their hands and knees. So it's a way that everyone comes in humble. Way back in the day, it also prevent people with large swords coming into the room. So samurais need to leave their swords behind. Sometimes there's like a rack for hanging your swords on the outside, and then you can come in. You can kind of see the feet of someone standing there. So the tea house is also elevated a little bit. So you step into the tea house. And I put that picture there just so you see the size of it. It's quite small, but everyone has to come in on their hands and knees. Well, there's always exceptions. If you're part of the imperial family, you do not have to come in and your hands. They have a whole nother door for you. So that's a shot from the outside, here's one from the inside. And then, but finally then, for the tea house we have here, you do make your way into the house itself. Let's see, oh, there's a few things in here. Well, they left a few implements out in the garden just so we can enjoy what the space would be like. You have this space here, which is called the tokonoma. That's where the flowers or the scroll arrangement will be, the scroll would go, or the flower arrangement. And then you have a few implements for tea. This is really a basic tea that they left out, so it doesn't require a lot of things. But I just wanted to point out that the scroll itself is considered like the highest, most important utensil in the tea room. There's a lot of things that we look at very carefully, and there's a lot of things we take a lot of care when we handle, but the tea scroll itself is the only thing we actually bow to. Everyone will go in front of it one by one. The guests would have a fan. They put their fan down, they take a look, and they bow to the scroll. Not that they're praising the scroll, it's that the person who wrote this put their heart and soul into it, so it's like they're here with you. So it's respect to the person, respect to the art, respect to the phrase itself, and it's the only thing we really take a moment to bow to. This particular one comes up a lot. You'll see this if you ever look up tea ceremony online, it's almost always gonna be this scroll. And you'll recognize it because the first one and the last character look kind of the same. I have more examples here. This is another day, but you know, we have the same scroll up here at Anderson Gardens, a different relationship or arrangement here, where the fire is closer in the middle of the room. You would do this in the colder seasons to keep the guests warm. But the scroll itself, you can see a little bit better here. And I have another one here. These are just for my notes. It helps me not forget things. You gotta make a lot of notes. So that first character is here, and it means day. And the last character also means day. And as it turns out, the second character is like a ditto mark that you use, and that also means day. So day after day, when you have two next to each other. So each day. So every day is a good day, is what it means. Nichi nichi kore kojitsu. So the feeling behind it is, it's not that every day is great and wonderful. We all know better than that. But the good and bad is just relative to your own particular point of view. You know, that something bad might be happening to you today, but is today really bad because someone cut you off in traffic? Maybe they were trying to get to the hospital and see their grandchild being born. Maybe they were, you know, distracted. Maybe, you know, like really it's bad because one little thing happened to you. And so if you can get out of your own selfish point of view, you see that every day is just good. Or another way to see it is that all days are connected in one big long thing. There's really aren't divisions of your life. It's one long thing. And if you ever have any good in your life, it's connected to the things that might have been difficult too. You know, you're married to your partner, you love this person, they're great, but you had to go through all those other bad relationships to understand and appreciate the person you're with right now. You've got your perfect job, but you had to have a bunch of crappy jobs first. So it wasn't bad that you had those other jobs. They're actually part of making your day good. So in some ways, it can be interpreted that it's all good. It's all good. So don't worry about it. But it doesn't mean it's all easy. Definitely doesn't mean it's all easy. It's just all good. So here's another shot of a tokonoma. Just another arrangement that could be in there. Trying to keep an eye on the time. We're still good. Okay. So back to the tea room here at Anderson Gardens. So the guests, again, they came this way and they're looking in from this side. And if you look all the way through, there's a door here that opens to another door. So this is not a VIP room. This is actually like the preparation room for making tea. I often like to think of it like, you can't have a restaurant without a kitchen. So if you go to a wonderful, beautiful restaurant, you know, the decor is wonderful, the chairs are beautiful, but they have no kitchen, it's kind of hard. Actually, now I think about it, didn't that happen here for a while, Tim? The restaurant upstairs didn't really have a kitchen?
Well, they had a kitchen. Didn't always work very well.
Yeah.
Now it does.
Now it does, now it does. So it makes it, so if, sometimes when people, the reason I bring this up is sometimes when people want a tea house or a tea room in their house or some separate structure, they just think about the tea room itself. 4.5 mat tea room, got it, I got enough space, tokonoma, we're good. But if you don't leave enough space with running water or something to actually prepare the tea, you're in bad shape because you can't really take care of your guests. And as you see in the garden, this is far, far away from any other building. So you're gonna run to another building, get food, and run back. It would be problematic. So this is just a couple other shots of a different tea room showing that preparation room. And this is like, that was in a museum, so they had some of the walls removed. So you can see what might be in that preparation area. So there's just a couple of shelves. Down here on the floor, that would be like a sink, like an open drain, so you can pour water through and everything will be fine. So this is not in Anderson Gardens. Actually, I'm not exactly sure where this is, but I picked it because I wanted to show that there's a difference between the sliding walls that you have in a tea room or any Japanese room. So we often see screens like this. Those are called shoji, and they're usually separating the inside to the outside. It goes right to the garden, right to the yard, or maybe a veranda or a hallway that has windows on it or something like that. The light comes straight through. You wouldn't have these separating room to room. Room to room separations are like this. They're still sliding doors, they're still sliding screens, but they're solid. And usually they have artwork on it, if you can afford it. So you have your shoji and your fusuma. Sorry, I always mess it up. There's the word for soji and shoji, and I often mess them up. One means these sliding screens, the other one means to clean up. And so I always not sure what I'm saying. So, just to run you through a little bit, the guests then are in the tea room. Yay, you're finally in the tea room. But you're not having tea yet, because a good portion of the tea gathering itself is there's a meal that comes along with it. So this is Gunji Sensei. Hopefully you've met her before. She's the teacher who ran the program at U of I for many, many years. She's retired now, but she does programs here too. So please come back, see Gunji Sensei. She's amazing. But I was lucky enough to be down in Champaign for a formal tea gathering. So that's me, and that's Sato Sensei, who's also been around. I think his paintings are upstairs. I saw in the fresco.
In the fresco in the restaurant, and there's also some of his paintings in the hallway right over here.
And actually, he started the program at the U of I. And then I think Gunji Sensei was his assistant, and then later she took over. So the two of them are the ones who brought tea ceremony to the U of I in Champaign. So just briefly, because I'm noticing the time. So the guests will greet the host, and this would really be the first time they spoke to each other. There's formal greetings. Thank you for having me here. Oh, it's my pleasure. And they go down the line. And then the first guest, they will take a moment and talk about all the wonderful things they've seen. The scroll that's hanging up in the tea room, the garden and how it's arranged, the tobacco bun and how things were taken care of. Just they have a nice conversation about that. And then the host says, oh, well, I'm gonna go in the back and see if I can find something for you to eat. You're like, okay, please don't go through any trouble. And then they start bringing out trays and trays and trays of food. So there's a set pattern to it all. There's a certain way that it's done, but it starts off with a tray that on the left here, you would have a rice, usually just plain rice. They did something a little special here. But you have rice on the left side, and they shaped it like a ginkgo leaf. And then you'll have a type of miso soup, usually, on the right side, left side, right side. And then you have some kind of sashimi dish, it's kind of raw fish and other vinegar dish here in the top. Here's a more traditional arrangement. So just a little bit of rice, some soup, and another dish there. Each guest is served individually. They eat when the host is not in the room, because the host is just here to take care of you. They do not really ever eat or drink with you. The guests are here to enjoy. So once again, the guests are kind of by themselves for a little bit. And then she comes in, oh, because you're not drinking water. You're not drinking tea. You're only drinking sake while you're having the meal. So, and this whole thing takes maybe an hour or so.
Wow.
So you're having food, you're having sake, you're having all these beautiful dishes. Each one you open up is like more interesting and beautiful than the one before. And then maybe after wrapping that up, she comes around and arranges the fire that will be used for the tea later. So there's a charcoal fire that you build in a room, probably really illegal now in the States, but it flies in Japan. You have a charcoal fire inside, and everyone's usually okay. Usually okay. And then after that, that's when you have your sweets. This is a different tea gathering, but it still fits. So I guess I was lucky enough to come down twice. And the sweets that you usually have then are these variety of sweets. They're really beautiful, moist, lush sweets that often have like bean paste in the middle, the sweetened on bean paste inside, and then mochi of some sort on the outside. They're wonderful. They're so wonderful, but you only get one. So, you're not gonna sit there and have sweet after sweet after sweet. Each guest gets one sweet. In fact, on that stack of trays there that's in front of Sato Sensei, each guest has one sweet inside. So you have to pass it over, have your sweet, and then the host says, please go outside, make yourself comfortable. I'm gonna refresh in the room so we can have tea.
Wow.
So you go back out to the waiting bench, you relax a little bit, maybe massage your legs a little bit, because you've been sitting on the floor for an hour or something like that. And then before leaving, the host said something like, when I'm ready, I'll come and get you. And then the guest's like, oh no, please don't do that. And the host says something like, well, I'll think about it. And so the guests will go outside and they're waiting, and what's gonna happen is, and yeah, I grabbed this from some site that I didn't pay for, but it was the best image I could find, because often in a tea room, you'll have a gong like this hanging in the tea room, and there'll be a little mallet. And so what happens then is, as this very happy gentleman is gonna talk about, is from a video he made. It's called a Dora, and that's what this says, Dora, and I think he's saying, Dora te nande chashitsu ni. I don't know. So like, why are you using it in a tea room, or what is it for? So this is what it's for. You have this gong, and the guests are waiting outside. Let's say you have 5 guests. And so you have to ring this bell in a certain pattern to let the guests know it's time to come in. So you start off maybe loud first, like, gong. The guests know, oh, it's gonna happen. So they get up, they kneel down by the bench, and then you keep going. Gong, gong, gong. Then you wait for it. Gong. And then the guests know it's time to come back. And they sit back at their seat, they wait a few moments, and then they do just as they did before by purifying their hands and mouth before going into the tea room. You do that every time you go in. This is another arrangement. And I have to giggle a little bit to myself because right here, this is bamboo. It's green bamboo. I grew up here in Rockford, okay? Love Rockford, but I grew up here in Rockford. So I didn't realize that bamboo is green when it's fresh. Like if it's really, really fresh, it's green like this. And then it turns that kind of yellow color over time. So throughout the tea garden, a lot of things have been replaced already. So you'll see fresh green bamboo everywhere. And that lets you know that the host just went through all this effort to put this out. And if it's not green anymore, it's kind of old. So this idea of freshness and cleanliness and purity and all this effort you're putting forth for your guests to have a great time. So even just something like this, the bamboo pole that feeds the water, could be fresh and green. Oh, wrong button. I just threw this in too because, as we were saying before, always prepare for rain. So the hosts have prepared these things for the guests as they make through their garden. So they have to help each other by holding these kind of umbrella hats above each other. So while they're purifying their hands and mouth, they don't get too wet. And instead of their regular kind of straw sandals, they have these wooden ones that have kind of elevated platforms to help keep you dry as you go through the garden. So the host has to be ready just in case. It's somewhere nearby. Well, again, I won't show every single thing about a tea gathering, and I didn't totally plan this out, but there it is again. Every day is a good day. We love this phrase. You'll see it. If it's not this one, it's another one that's ichigo ichie, which means one moment, one opportunity, saying that every moment in life is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now, it's easy to see in a tea gathering because you have this big, wonderful, special thing. but the idea should inspire you and should see that every moment in your life is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And the kind of effort and care that you put in just to sit and have a bowl of tea, that kind of effort you could be putting into everything you do. When you wake up, have your oatmeal. Do you fix your bed when you wake up? Do you not fix your bed when you wake up? How you take care of your children, how you start your car, how, you could put that kind of care into more things in life. And so it's just a reminder of that every moment is a special moment. The other half of that I like to think of is that to really be in this moment, you have to let the past go. So you have to be right here, right now. So you can't enjoy right now if you're thinking about what do I have to do when I get home? Right. Or what do I have to do? Did I do this in the morning? Or this is what has to happen now? Or how much can I get out of this situation? How much does this cost me? Whatever goes on in our minds. You have to be able to be completely here. And sometimes that means letting everything else go and just be right here. And if you can, then you're usually gonna have a good time. It's really hard to do. And so sometimes it does take all this effort, just to have a moment to do that. So here's the arrangement for sitting around having tea. Here's another shot, again, of the host making tea. And you can see some of the things we spoke about, the stepping stones. This is probably the sukubai here that they covered, just for the off season. So they probably should have uncovered that for the photo shoot, but that's okay. And again, yes, tea. We still have time, so I'm going to show you something cool. Just got to get some help here. So it's almost 8 o'clock, but we still have a couple more minutes, and I just wanted to share something with you. Okay. So usually when we have tea, or we think about matcha, it's something like this, right? Nice, thick, foamy bowl of tea. But the highlight of a tea gathering isn't this. This is actually what we consider usucha, which is thin tea. What we're coming for is koicha. That's thick tea. It's still matcha, maybe definitely chosen to be a more stronger variety of matcha, far less water and a whole lot more tea. It's not like this. It's the consistency of this. It looks more like a smoothie, melted ice cream, or pea soup. Everybody's portion is put in one bowl, and everyone will drink their portion, clean it with a cloth, and pass it to someone else. It's the only thing we ever pass hand to hand, because otherwise we don't want to break things. But it's almost like a communion. We all drink from this bowl. And so instead of putting it on the floor like we usually do and have the other person pick it up, the thick tea, the bowl with the thick tea, is something that we pass around. So I'm gonna pass some stuff around. 1 second. Just to show the difference, because the thick tea is considered, here we go. I'm gonna give this and just pass it around the room, please. Hey, those up. So the thick tea, again, is considered the highlight of the gathering, and this is what you're here for. You're only gonna get one sip of this tea, and that's it. So if you love it, and I hope you do, you're not gonna get more. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and this is all you're gonna get. So yeah, you leave a person wanting more. These bowls are usually very somber, very quiet, often very rough. Later then, you will have thin tea, and the thin tea would be often more in a bowl like this. Here we go. It should all be making its way around. Told you should have set up close. But everyone's gonna see this. Don't leave without seeing these. So the thin tea bowl can have more decoration to it. The thin tea bowl might look super gorgeous, but it's not the appropriate bowl for koicha. It's like, let's say if you're gonna wear your tuxedo for a gathering, you can't wear your spangled dress for it. It might be more expensive, it might be more showy, it might take more skill to do, but it's not appropriate. Because koicha is a quiet, introspective moment. But the nice thing is, when you do have usucha, you can have as much usucha as you want. What happens then is, even if we're using the same one bowl, the host would make a person's portion, they would drink it, the bowl will come back, they clean the bowl, and then they make it for the next person. So one by one, not at the same time, but one by one, each guest is having their sweet and tea. And if they want to, they can have as much as they want. In fact, the host will keep going until told to stop. So you have 5 people, they're gonna make 5 bowls, 7 bowls, 8 bowls, and they just keep going until someone says, oh, that's wonderful, we've had enough, please finish. I just wanted to include this too, because this is more what the sweets will look like for usucha. They're usually dry sweets, not the wonderful moist sweets, but they're usually small and dry. And oh, our friend the tobacco tray shows up again, because at this point in the tea gathering, the tobacco tray is brought out again to say, please relax. So there's like 3 times you see this tobacco at a tea gathering. And hopefully 3 times you don't smoke. You could. And I just wanted to show you quickly then a little bit of what it could look like when you're making a bowl of thin tea. But I know we're getting close to the time. I wanted to stop. Do you have to take off?
Yeah, for the bus, but.
Okay, that's good. I'm just gonna take questions. That's my sister. She has to go. Well, then here, Michelle, let me show you one thing then before you
Okay.
go. I was gonna wait a minute for this, but this weekend's also pretty nice for us too, because my wife and I, because 19 years ago, well,
Oh, yeah.
so you see this now here. This is the gazebo. I'm not sure what you call it here right now.
Called the pavilion.
Pavilion, there you go. You have the pavilion outside, but this is what I remember. We were married here 19 years ago in June, so actually it's our anniversary this month.
Yeah.
And so, so this is perfect for us. Here we are.
There's your
There's- So there we are. So
That's our 21-year-old.
my son that I'm holding, he's 21 years old. He can probably carry me. There's my niece. She's also quite big
25,
now.
yeah.
And she's like 6 feet.
Close.
Yeah. So, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for letting us come back, and this turned out perfectly for us. So it was a great celebration for us. But I do want to take any questions, but I just wanted to say, show you that before you go.
Thanks.
I'll see you later, Dad. So, I know I ran through that a little fast, in a way, and I hope everyone got to see the bowl. Don't take it home, please. So, any questions? Yes, sir, please.
Okay, you show, when your pictures you show on like the dinner, they're all sitting like with their knees tucked behind them. Is it like, if you can't sit like that, would it be like a disrespectful act, or if like you
Well,
can't sit on your knees in that situation?
That's a hard one. Yeah, I wouldn't say it's disrespectful, you know. Oh, you can just leave it on the table, please.
Like a person with like a knee issue or something, it's just
Well,
hard
it does
for them to
come
sit
up,
like
you know,
that.
it is hard, and sitting on your knees is like actually one of the more difficult things about being at a tea gathering. It kind of hurts,
Yeah.
you know, and some schools use that as a form of punishment for their students. You know, they make their students sit seiza, you know, so it's hard. I would say, if you can't sit on your knees, you can sit cross-legged.
Yeah.
You know, your host would usually accommodate you, and they would usually try to help you feel as comfortable as possible. We have ways that we can do all of this from tables and chairs too, so people don't have to sit on the floor. But it's one of those hard things. I'm using this wheelchair. I can stand and walk around, but my legs aren't what they used to be. So it's a weird balance of, I don't want to put my host out. I don't want to make them uncomfortable and make them worry about me. They want me to feel comfortable, but then I don't want them to worry about me. So sometimes you just don't go. And sometimes your hosts are nice enough to make accommodations for you. But it hurts everybody. So there's no one who's like, I can do this forever. You know, you can do it for longer and longer. I often, you know, there's a little benches you can put underneath you to help yourself out. But it's true, it's a big obstacle for people to feel comfortable sitting on your knees. There's one part of it that just says, well, you just do it. But that's the training side, you know, you just do it, you just muscle through it, you just gotta figure it out. But the host side of you wants to say, well, we'll just make it easier. So sit cross-legged, or I'll get you a bench, or let's do it outside. Or there's some rooms that actually have sunken floors, so you can kind of sit and put your feet under like a table. So you're still at the floor level and they can accommodate you. So a good host should be able to make you comfortable and not make you feel strange by being there. That being said, Not everybody's a good host. So, yes, do you have a question or were you stretching?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was
Okay. I thought I had you. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So does the host create the sprawl, or do they usually purchase it?
They usually purchase it. It is possible that the host could make many of the implements used for a tea gathering. You don't want to go overboard because you don't want to like make your guests feel obligated to praise your work. You know, so any good guest will love anything you put up, but you know, you gotta have good taste. So if you do make things, I would say don't make everything, but absolutely, it could be something made by the host. It could be something made by one of your guests. You know, so I could have, one of my guests was a ceramic potter, and that's a bowl that, you know, she made for me years ago, and I invite her over for a tea gathering, and I use the bowl that she made for me. You know, that's wonderful. Or there's times at a tea gathering, there's like a flower arrangement used, or like say a time where you're gonna lay the charcoal and different things, and you might say to your guests, you are so good at arranging flowers, Sensei. Could you do the flower arrangement? And you would say no. Then I would say please. And then you would say no, and then you would finally do it. And so, you know, those things can happen. But yeah, it would be, I think it might be in poor taste to overdo it with your own stuff. I've heard, like, for instance, with the food, a lot of it is, you know, beautiful, wonderful, handmade food. But there's a line that you have to decide what side to do. In Japan, it's easier. There's restaurants who their whole career is making these foods for you, like catering restaurants and stuff. So you get the best. That's how you take care of your guests. Other people say you need to make it all yourself and make it and put your whole heart into it. And that's good too. But what if you're not a good cook? I mean, not really. And so, but your guests have to sit there and love everything. As a guest, you're supposed to clear your plate. Not only clear your plate, you're supposed to have cloths and you sop up all the oil and drippings on the bowls so it doesn't stain the ware. So there's nothing left behind. And if you're a terrible cook or just so-so, you know, so in good taste then a person has to figure out how much is too much. But absolutely, it could be your calligraphy, it could be your bowl, you could have built the tea house, you know, but just you have to be aware of your own abilities sometimes and hold back just a little bit. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, did you have a question? Oh, I guess you were stretching. Darn, I thought I saw one.
I got another one for you.
Yes, please.
What's your favorite variety of tea, and like where's your favorite place to purchase it?
Oh, you know, I'm trying really, really hard to not have a favorite.
Yeah.
Because there's a part of Chanoyu, there's a part of this whole culture that can be very elitist, that can be very snobby. We're friends, I can say that. So then people get very stuck in their ways, and there's like this mental ranking, like this tea plantation is the best. If you're gonna give anyone tea, it has to be this tea. Or tea from Uji is better than any place else in Japan, so you can't buy matcha from any place else. And that feels kind of closed-minded for me, so I actually have fun in trying different matchas. The latest one, I buy a lot from Amazon too. So there's this new variety I found that's Korean matcha, and it's good. So I've been enjoying that, and Chinese matcha, although usually it's from Japan. But if I have to say, there is a company called Ippodo that's really nice. They're easy to get their tea because they have websites here in the United States. And even Rishi Tea, which is in Milwaukee? They have a nice matcha too. You know, so there are places you don't have to go all the way to Japan or order straight from Japan. There's really nice places here. So off the top of my head, I would say, yeah, Rishi is good and Ippodo. Koyama Inn is maybe the best. But again, I try to pick other teas because the best is often very expensive. And for my own students too, I try not to make this so unattainable. There's a lot of stuff you gotta get. You know, and eventually there's so much that you can't do anything because it takes thousands just to really get going. So just do what you have, get what you can, and if you try the tea and it's terrible, make ice cream from it. That's always good too. Just mix it with ice cream and it's beautiful. So there's no bad matcha out there. just gotta use it. Well, any more questions? I don't wanna keep anyone late, but it's about 8:15 right now. Well, then in that case, I will say thank you very much. I really appreciate it. If you do have any questions, please come up, but otherwise, thanks for coming out tonight. And I'm sorry, the room's a little warm, but you'll feel so refreshed when you step outside. Thank you.
Thank you.
If anyone is interested in studying and learning more about tea, we do have a tea study group here at Anderson Gardens. You can see me or Keiko-san up front. Keiko, would you mind raising your hand, please?
Please
Sachio
join.
has information about the tea club. And then also, some of you may have known that there was a Ikebana class going on, and Reiko Sensei is here. And so if you're interested in learning more about Ikebana, you can talk to her.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Samples.
ありがとうございました。あ、本当に。
すごいよかった。でもね、パン。
It feels weird, like, so it feels strange, so much. But I hope it was interesting.
Purchased your flat.
Oh, good, good.
Yeah.
So. There's a lot of serious parts to Chanoyu, but we really just have fun being together. Sometimes we're very quiet, but most of the time we're talking and just having a good time. Careful, having a good time.
Because I used to just do
Thank you,
it.
thank you.
Well, today I had flower arrangements. Like, oh,
It's gotten a little hot in here, hasn't it? Okay, I thought it was just me, because,
church, all they care is about a Christian family. Just
it's a nice coincidence that we came back here.
But to do something
Thank
like
you.
Thank you.
And we were really lucky, because I kept asking the people here when we were making the arrangements for the wedding, I'm like, I'm studying tea, I brought all these pictures and stuff, like, can we use the tea? And so they let us, so the day before,
You made tea for
for
my
your,
parents.
yeah, you and your parents, and my father was here. So we used the tea room, and
it was really nice.
yeah. So I was lucky, because I realized now it's a rare thing to be able to use it. So, I kept trying, so, yeah, that was cool. But no pictures, because we don't usually take pictures in the tea room. It's supposed to be a moment that you live and enjoy, so that's why it was so hard to find anything.
So beautiful.
Yeah, because you're supposed to